Welcome back to my video series on wholesale for your handmade business. If you're new here, I'm Caitlin. I run a six-figure soap business that I have been running since 2018, and I share all of my tips and tricks and my experience with you here on YouTube. And I've been doing a wholesale video series, just walking you through all of my tips and tricks as far as finding new retailers, how to price your goods, building a wholesale website. So I'll leave all those videos down below. Today, I'm gonna do one big wrap up of some various questions that you guys have put in all the other comments or I've collected on Instagram. I know sometimes a question may not warrant a full video, so hopefully I can answer all the questions that you guys have sent me over the last few weeks in today's video. So let's just get right to it because there's quite a few and I wanna make sure I answer as much as I can. So the first question I got is, what are payment terms and how do you handle that? So when you are working with a wholesaler or retailer, they oftentimes are used to something called payment terms, and this means that the vendor, so me, I give them a period of time where payment is due from shipment. So sometimes it is on delivery. A lot of the times the industry standard is kind of net 30, which means you have 30 days from when the order is either shipped or delivered for them to pay you. A lot of businesses, like in the department store, true like retail sector, big chain stores, they do net 60, 90, I've even seen 120. So that basically means that the vendor, us, who's selling the retailer product, has to give them the product and we won't get paid for that many days. It can be really difficult, especially if you're small like myself. I offer net 30. I rarely offer anything different. The only other time I've ever offered net 60 is sometimes for my seasonal stores. I do sell quite a bit on Cape Cod or little resort areas. So for them to purchase their inventory in advance before they're even open, sometimes they're not open until May, but they want to get their floor set, that is when I may extend my terms a little bit, just knowing that they won't have the time to sell the products. But it's totally up to you and your discretion. You don't have to offer payment terms. I do think it is a great negotiating tactic if you're working with some bigger stores. It definitely is a courtesy, and I know a lot of retailers are used to getting payment terms from Fair. I believe Fair gives them a net 60-day term before their credit card gets charged. So retailers are used to payment terms. It is kind of unheard of for them to pay right upon delivery. However, I think a lot of small businesses and small retailers understand, if you're a small vendor, that could be really difficult. So when I first got started, I didn't offer payment terms. So again, it's totally up to you, but I do think it is a nice way to sort of build a relationship with your retailers and giving them that little window for them to be able to sell some of the product before they have to pay you. The next question is, how did you know you were ready for wholesale? And this really came into my lap. My first wholesale customer reached out to me. It was a local store who I still sell today, and they just wanted to partner with a local person. They were really trying to build their store and fill their store with local products. So it really helped that they found me at a local market and they loved the look of my brand and me, and so they reached out and wanted to bring my products into their store. That definitely helped a little bit of a snowball effect, and slowly but surely I started adding more retailers to my list of wholesale clients because they just saw that I now was doing it. So I think the thing that's the most important to just make sure that you grasp, other than the things we've talked about like price, is can you handle a wholesale business? You can control it, so you don't have to say yes to everyone that reaches out. But I think for me, the one thing I never really understood was how much time it would take me to fill orders for wholesale. The wholesale business is fabulous, but it does mean more units and more volume of product. And if you're hand making your products like I was for the first 3 years of my business, it's gonna be a lot for you to do all of that on top of your regular orders. I think one of you guys asked me that question, like, how do you manage time with wholesale? So I do think that could be the hardest part, is just making sure that you have enough product to fulfill wholesale. It's also different because sometimes the products that sell best in wholesale and retail might be different from what your best sellers are, and you just have to look at the numbers and you have to sort of track that. I always think slow is better. So if you're gonna get into wholesale, definitely try it, definitely dip your toe, but maybe you just start with one retailer and you go from there and get that under your belt for a few months before you start adding a ton. I do think expanding, it can happen really fast. And when I did get on Fair and I was doing my bath bombs, under the Fiorella Soapery brand, that was something where I was just selling hundreds a week and I couldn't keep up with it. It was very labor intensive to make them, to paint them, to then shrink wrap them and then box them. And then by the time I ended up taking all of my cost of goods and labor, I was making like 25 cents profit per bath bomb. It just didn't make any sense to me. So even though I was selling all that volume, it didn't work and it was taking so much time. So I chose to get rid of that category. So you kind of have to make those choices when you get into wholesale. I do think streamlining your brand and not having a ton of categories is really helpful. But as far as being ready for wholesale, I think it just depends on what you make it. So start small, start with one account and see where that takes you, and then you can kind of figure it out from there. The next question is, have you ever done a trade show, and will you ever do a trade show if you haven't? So I've never done a wholesale trade show for myself. I have attended them as a corporate retail buyer in my past life, but basically I haven't done it because it's a huge expense. So I've talked to a lot of people that have done it. I've sort of done my research, and it's different for everyone, of course, but the expense of going to a trade show, from what I've gathered, is somewhere around $10,000 for your entry into the show, your setup of your booth, and then you add on things like travel, hotels, meals. It can get really expensive. And I've also heard that some of the ones like Atlanta and Dallas, although they're great shows, it's very difficult to be seen. So most of the time when I've talked to someone, they haven't made that fee back in wholesale accounts and purchase orders. You know, everyone looks on the bright side and says, well, I made a lot of great connections. I handed out a ton of business cards and people saw me and I could post it on social media and it gave me some credibility. So yes, there is that factor, but right now where I'm sitting in my business, I just can't justify spending that kind of money going to a wholesale trade show. There are some regional ones. I know where I am, I think it's called New England Made. I believe it's only like $1,000 or $2,000 to do the booth there. And if it's closer to you, then obviously travel is a little bit less. So you can definitely look around. It doesn't have to be one of the big trade shows in Atlanta, Dallas, or even New York, or Vegas. There's a lot in Vegas. But I do feel like the foot traffic has been down considerably from what it used to be 5, 6, 7 years ago. And then as a buyer, when I was going to those trade shows as a retail buyer, I already had my schedule made out. So I knew who I was gonna see. There was very little exploratory time. And even then, there's so many new vendors, you just can't get to all of them, and they all kind of blend together, and it's just really hard to stand out. So unless you have a lot of money to be able to secure a corner spot or a front facing spot, or really invest in your booth display and fixtures and just decor, if you have money to spend on it, I would say go for it. For me right now, I just can't justify that in my business, and what I'm doing has actually helped in opening up more accounts. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it's definitely something down the road that I will do. I don't think it's something I need to do today at this very point in time, but as I get bigger, I would absolutely love to be at a trade show, but when I have enough money to sort of present myself in the way I want to some of those new retailers. The next question is, what other wholesale platforms? So I currently only sell direct on my own website and on Faire. I know there were a few others like Abound that I sold on for a hot second, but I just found it to be very difficult to manage multiple since I was already on Faire. I know this question came from someone who's been trying to get on Faire and hasn't, so is looking for some other alternatives. I really don't have a ton of experience elsewhere. I actually think Abound closed or they rebranded. I'm not entirely sure. I guess the thing is that where the retailers are is really where you should try to be. I'm not sure how Etsy wholesale has been. That might be a question, another person in here, if you guys have experience, definitely leave a comment down below for this person, because I don't have experience, so I can't really speak to it. That would be the only other platform that I've really heard about, other than the Shopify wholesale, which I think is called Handshake. I don't know enough about those platforms to give you a review, but if I had to say which one to do, I probably would explore the Etsy and the Shopify one more than anything else. Unfortunately, most retailers are already using Faire because it's the most well-known and most brands are on it already, so I just think it could be a little bit hard. But it doesn't mean that no one's using it. So I think things change like the wind in this industry. So maybe try Shopify Handshake and see if that works. Obviously, if you're on Shopify, and if you're not, yeah, maybe try the Etsy one. But if you do find out anything, report back and let us all know. That would be fabulous. But other than that, I don't really have any suggestions. I'm very sorry. Okay, the next question, what wholesale terms should we know? I know sometimes I throw these in and out, and part of that is just because of my background from being a corporate buyer, but essentially there's a few terms that you should definitely know that I think will make you feel a little bit more confident and a little bit more polished when you talk to retailers. So the first one is ATS. So ATS stands for available to ship. That basically means, what do you have in stock? Retailers are constantly buying in different time periods, so they're not always buying today for something to be delivered next week. Oftentimes retailers are buying a year out in advance. So most stores, we're sitting in the end of May, most retail stores are placing or have already placed their Christmas merchandise buy already. So they're used to working out in the future. So ATS is a term that means available to ship, that if they have current needs in their business, that means you can get it to them quickly. You can sort of give them the window that works. So depending upon how you fulfill, you can still say 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks. I still think that falls in the ATS bucket. It basically just means more current product. That kind of leads us into the next one called lead time. So that essentially is, how long does it take you to fulfill your order? On Faire, you can actually set this, what your lead time would be. So mine is 1 to 3 days because everything I have listed on Faire is in stock. Essentially, I could actually put my upcoming holiday products up on Faire for a pre-order if I wanted to, and set a different lead time for that. But essentially, lead time is just how long it takes you to ship. And the next two are I kind of interchange them, which you really shouldn't do, but it's mark on and mark up. Basically, mark up is what the retailer does to the price. So it's how much they're marking that cost up. Sometimes industry people look at their markup and use a formula and say it should be 2.5 times or 2 times. I think department stores historically have been 7 times the cost. So that's how you can kind of understand what that means, but that's the markup. And then the mark on is usually when they're talking about how much profit is built in. So they're kind of essentially the same thing, but mark on is usually more of a financial business profitability term. So again, if you had something that they paid $5 for and you retailed it at 10, your mark on would still be 50%. So a little math involved there, but just so you guys know, as you are opening retailers and talking with them, you might have some of these conversations, and I want you to have the vocabulary down. You can also Google these things too, but that's for the most part is the top terms that I think could be helpful for you. The next question is about bundles. So one of you asked, you sell bundles as a discount for your customers. How do you wholesale bundles when the profit is already so low? I would say I don't do that. If the retailer wants to create a gift set, that's fine. I think most often retailers are looking for an even higher price point. I have a lot of stores that will retail my soaps, which I sell for $24. A lot of those retailers sell them for $26. I'm not sure a retailer is necessarily looking to sell a bundle at a discount. It could be different. That could be their model that works, but most often retailers are starting at the high, and then eventually as the season comes along, that's when they do a sale or a markdown. So I really don't think that a bundle is something that happens often in the retail world. And if you would rather offer your retailers a bundle, what I would consider doing is, say if they buy all 3 categories. So let's take my brand as an example. If someone buys the same scent in my sugar scrub, my soap, and my body butter, maybe you give them a 5% discount if they bundle all of that and they buy all those categories. I still think the retailer is probably going to retail them individually and at your price point or higher, but you've sort of created that bundle discount for them without eating away all of your profit. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I haven't really seen a bundle for sale in the wholesale space. So I hope that was the question that you had, and I hope I answered it correctly. Another question that came up with my wholesale website video is how I integrate my inventory with all my platforms. Unfortunately, Shopify, I have to run 2 separate inventories. So I have my inventory for my regular website for direct to customers, and then I have my wholesale website inventory. So I have inventory in two spaces. I basically separated that out like 60-40. 60% of my order went into my wholesale website, 40% went to my website, because that's kind of how it falls most often. If I need to shift inventory around, I certainly can. Unfortunately, that can't really speak to each other the way Shopify is. I would have to sign up for the Shopify Plus plan, which I believe starts at $2,000 a month to run a website, which I'm not there yet. I don't even know if I'll ever be there. So I have 2 separate inventories, and then my Fair account pulls from my wholesale website inventory. So I do truly have a break of 60% of my inventory goes to wholesale, which is my website and Fair, and 40% is my direct to consumer. So I hope that clears that up. Another question specific to Fair, as far as who collects payment from Fair, that is one of the benefits. They handle all the payments, so no matter what, you get paid. The beauty of that is you can, I believe there's 3 options that you can choose as the vendor. You can choose payment right at the time of the order, you can choose net 30 or net 60, and each one is a different percent off the commission or something. So I'm at net 30. I could do net 60. I like to run a little bit more current, just because I'm trying to grow and scale my business, so I need that cash flow right now. As you get more established, a net 60 shouldn't really be a problem. I did some of the calculations though, and it's really just a couple dollars. It's not a big deal. So for me to be net 30 on Fair is great, and they take care of all that payment. So when that 30-day hits, I find the entire invoice amount of money is directly deposited into my bank account, which is really great because it saves me from having to chase around retailers for payment. Okay, the last question is about email marketing. One of you asked if I had a separate Klaviyo account for my wholesale. I do not. I hardly ever email my retailers, so I haven't transitioned over to that. I definitely think in the future I would. I use Klaviyo for my full Solette list of customers, and I do have it broken out within there, my wholesale customers, if I have to email them. So I don't want to pay for 2 separate accounts right now, just because I don't really use my wholesale email all that much. But you can create a segment within Klaviyo to just send messages to that group of people. So I find that to be pretty good for right now. I hope I answered all your questions. I'm sure some of you may have more, but I have loved this wholesale series. I have one more video coming up after this. It's actually a collaboration, and I'm very excited about it. So I hope to see you guys in that one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you later. Bye.